So today I'm going to be going over how to build your Endgame Ice Lightning Monk so you can farm tier 15 maps and beyond with ease. This build has it all: incredible clear speed so you can destroy dense maps and breaches with ease, amazing single target DPS so bosses fall over in seconds, and then we also have incredible survivability through huge amounts of evasion and energy shield. In this video I'm also going to break down how you can get 6-figure DPS with your Ice Strike without needing a 6-link gem and without breaking the bank and spending lots on your weapon. Trust me, a lot of people don't know these tips, and some of these will be applicable to any build. I'm also going to cover how you can stack up your defenses so you have over 5,000 ES and life alongside tons of evasion so you never die. So if you're new to Monk, let's go over the premise of the build and the key components. If you know all this, then you can use the timestamps below to get to whichever section you need. Ice Strike is our main attack, which performs successive strikes, the third one being more powerful than the others and applies 80% of our physical damage as cold damage. This allows us to chill and freeze enemies. Charged Staff applies lightning damage to our attacks, which allows us to apply shock to enemies, which is a debuff allowing you to hit enemies for more damage. And then we have Temper Spell, which we drop on stronger enemies like bosses to boost our damage output significantly when spamming Ice Strike. The way we get power charges effortlessly to power Charged Staff is through the skill Combat Frenzy and the passive keystone Resonance. So every time we freeze or shock an enemy, we now gain power charges. The AoE in this build, where you see me destroy an entire pack of enemies in one hit, requires 3 things: Herald of Ice, which causes an explosion when you shatter an enemy; Herald of Thunder, which when you kill a shocked enemy brings down lightning. These two alone can cause a lot of AoE damage, but then we combine this with the unique ring Pulsicon. Pulsicon allows even chilled enemies to act as if they were frozen, so when combined with Herald of Ice, it will quickly lead to a chain reaction of shattering. To start this build, you don't need a well-rolled Pulsicon. Even a below average one is more than good enough, and you can find a starter one for pretty cheap for just 1 to 3 Exalted Orbs very easily on the trade website. So now you understand the premise of the build, let's go over how we scale our damage and hit 6 figures and beyond with Ice Strike. The biggest thing people are missing with Ice Strike is attack speed. Attack speed is godly for Ice Strike. Attack speed multiplicatively scales all of our damage because everything is done faster as a result. And also for Ice Strike, you want to do the third attack more often before you have to dodge or move away, because that's where the higher damage lies. Ice Strike has a slight movement tech with it as well. It locks onto enemies when you swing slightly further away, so being able to swing more often meant I was almost able to teleport from one pack of enemies to another way easier, so my overall clear speed for higher tier maps just went through the roof. So keeping that in mind, let's go over our skill gems and support gems for Ice Strike. So to start off with, a higher level Ice Strike skill gem will give us more damage, but don't break the bank and get a level 20 skill gem, it's just not necessary. What you really need is to improve the quality of Ice Strike using Gem Cutter Prisms to 20%. This will give you a further 10% attack speed bonus. For your support gems, we're using Martial Temper, which gives us 25% more attack speed. This, when we equip it, roughly makes up 19k of our 94k DPS. Concentrated Effect is our next gem, which gives us a nearly whopping 26k of our DPS. Primal Armament, which gives us nearly 17k of our DPS, and then we have Cold Infusion, which gives us 13k of our DPS. You'll see I don't have a 6-link yet. If I did, I would add Ice Bite, which doesn't actually change the tooltip DPS as you can see here. This is because Ice Bite applies the 35% damage boost when you freeze an enemy, so standing still in town you won't see the DPS increase. Now most build guides have you using Rage as well in the Ice Strike support gems. Rage gives you more attack damage when you hit an enemy with a melee attack, which can stack up to 30%. This, when maximized, is a massive DPS boost as it's a multiplicative boost. This is what takes our 93k DPS standing still in town to well over 150k DPS when in battle. But instead of using it as a support gem, what we do is we incorporate it into our build through a jewel. This jewel now gives us 1 rage on melee hit, which functions very similarly to our support gem. A ruby with the rage affix goes for just 1 exalted orb. It's so cheap, and it's a massive boost to our DPS by saving a slot for other support gems so you get the best of both worlds. Now probably the biggest component of our damage output is our weapon. The 2 most important modifiers for this by far are flat physical damage added and percentage increase physical damage. The more flat physical damage you have, the more it gets scaled upwards through the percentage increase modifier, so both are important. The other modifiers you want in descending order are attack speed, percentage increased elemental damage with attacks, critical hit chance, and critical hit damage bonus. To find a good weapon on the trade website based on your budget, I would do this: Search for war staffs with say 4 of the modifiers. Limit the search based on your budget. Word of warning, there are a ton of really crap staffs out there for 1 divine. Lots of people dump really bad stuff for 1 divine, so I would rather search for 100 exalted orbs as your budget if around 1 divine is your actual true budget. Then sort by physical DPS and have a browse. Now most people avoid using plus levels to melee skills on their weapon because it doesn't give as big a damage boost as say plus levels to spell skills for other classes, and it increases mana cost by a lot. But what I will say is that if you're struggling to afford a good war staff, then these staffs can provide good DPS. This staff here in my inventory I got for just 20 exalted orbs, whereas my main attack speed staff, which I'm using now, costs 1 divine, and they actually provide comparable DPS on the Ice Strike tooltip. However, what you have to run to avoid mana drain is a gem with recover mana on kill. So this is a cheap alternative if you're struggling to afford the high DPS staffs without the plus melee skills affix. There are other important pieces of gear that can boost Ice Strike damage even further. Your rings are your next most important slot for damage. My rare ring here has flat physical damage, flat cold damage, percentage increased cold damage, along with some defensive affixes. This is giving me around 13k DPS. The Pulsarken ring also gives a good amount of DPS through its percentage cold damage. Your gloves are also an important source of damage. Look for high rolls on flat physical damage, flat cold damage and attack speed. You can see my gloves here give me around 12k DPS. Finally, we have my helmet, which has increased critical hit chance. This also provides a little bit of DPS, but it's the lowest from all of my gear, but it is a little boost nonetheless. If I take it off here, I do lose that intelligence, so you can't actually see the Ice Strike DPS change here. The last component to our DPS comes from our passive skill tree and other jewels. I'll cover that a little later in the passive tree section. Let's next talk about our defensive layers. One of the best defensive layers we have in this game is evasion, because what's better than being hit for less damage, not being hit for any damage at all. So when you're first getting into mapping, I actually recommend getting a body armor piece with pure evasion. They're really cheap, and then from the passive node Bestial Skin, you'll get a lot of evasion from your chest piece. Initially I did have a pure evasion build, however evasion has diminishing returns. The more evasion you have, the less percentage chance you get for further evasion at the higher numbers. Also, you will eventually get hit from time to time, so you can't spec purely into evasion. You still have to have other defensive layers. So eventually I decided to drop the pure evasion chest piece. I also decided to drop the helmet with pure evasion as well. Instead, I switched to a hybrid evasion and energy shield chest piece. This dropped my evasion from 89% to 85%, so a 4% reduction. But I ended up gaining a whopping 1200 energy shield from that switch. You can see that going from 23,800 evasion to 16,500 evasion rating only dropped my evasion by 4%. The higher the evasion rating, the less value you get from it. Even 85 evasion rating is a lot. You could probably get away with a lower evasion rating stat, something around 80%, and then focus on even more energy shield. I still have some switches to make for my gear, which will drop my evasion rating to probably around 80% and give me even more energy shield, but I'll explain that a little later. This 1200 energy shield from my chest piece is actually worth 2400 energy shield in a lot of scenarios because of Grim Feast, which is a buff we use which lets you overcharge your energy shield to double. So most of the time we actually run around with over 4k energy shield instead of 2k, so you can tank those big heavy hits more effectively. Our other defensive layers are our other buffs. Wind Dancer gives us even more evasion. Ghost Dance gives us a chance to recover 5% of our evasion as energy shield when we do get hit. 5% of 16,000 evasion rating is like 800 energy shield, so it's not an insignificant amount to gain back. Now Ghost Dance will only proc when you are lower than your base maximum energy shield. So a lot of people don't run it with Grim Feast because you'll be above your base maximum in a lot of scenarios. However, I still highly recommend running it. There are scenarios where you dip a lot more in your energy shield because of modifiers like Burning Ground in higher tier maps. So having that extra defensive layer to proc when you are low in energy shield is really useful. Finally, we also have maximum life on gear. Look out for this on your chest piece specifically. Resistances being capped are very important. The one downside I'm currently having is chaos damage. we only have 10% chaos damage resistance in the build. At the moment, a lot of my gear has rarity of items found, so I get better drops. If GGG nerfs this stat, which might be on the cards, then I might switch a lot of my gear to more chaos resistance gear, which will solve that problem. You could also spec into chaos inoculation, but then we need to spec into more energy shield nodes and lose out on a lot of damage nodes within our current passive tree. I think when I do get a better weapon with say 600, 700 physical DPS, this may be a more viable switch. So now we understand both the offensive side and the defensive side of the build, let's go over everything else. Starting with skill gems. So for Ice Strike, I'm running Martial Tempo, Concentrated Effect, Primal Armament, Cold Infusion, and if you do have a 6th link, then run Ice Bite on top. For Temper Spell, run Font of Rage, so on bosses you can get to 30% rage much faster, Heft for more damage, Close Combat for even more attack damage, Heavy Swing for more melee physical damage, and then you can also add something like Font of Mana if you're struggling with mana on bosses. For Charge Staff, we have Conduction, Persistence, and Overcharge. For Herald of Ice, Cold Penetration, Cannibalism, which will help you heal when killing enemies, and Magnified Effect for more Shatter AoE. For Combat Frenzy, Clarity for more mana regen, and Profusion for a chance to gain 2 charges. Grim Feast, which powers most of our energy shield regeneration. Ghost Dance with Fast Forward, so there's less duration between gaining Ghost Shrouds. Wind Dancer with Culling Strike and Blind. And then finally Herald of Thunder with Lightning Infusion and Penetration. For gear, we've discussed a lot of it already. For your staff, you want high physical damage affixes as the highest priority. Then look for attack speed, elemental damage, critical hit chance, and critical damage bonus. For my helmet, I went for an evasion and energy shield hybrid helmet that had rarity, critical hit chance, and more evasion and energy shield. I'm going to change this for a pure energy shield helmet because we can then use the node Subterfuge Mask to get more evasion and more energy shield overall. So that is one thing I will change later on in the build, or as I level up a little bit higher I will add those nodes. For your amulet, you want evasion rating, energy shield, rarity, and the relevant resistances. I anointed High Alert, which gives you even more evasion rating when on full health, which is great for more defense, but I would actually change this to Storm Charge eventually, which gives you more elemental damage and more critical hit chance. It's just that the Essence of Fear required to anoint Storm Charge costs a lot of exalt, so I'm waiting to switch this. The spirit on my amulet is a waste. We don't actually receive any spirit from gear because of this Ascendancy node, which if you have good gear with evasion and energy shield gives you everything you ever need in terms of spirit. For your rare ring, look for physical damage flat, cold damage flat, cold percentage damage increase for boosting overall damage, and then look for rarity and resistances. Your other ring is the Pulsarcane ring, but if you don't want to use this, then you can use a similar rolled rare ring to before. My chest piece is a hybrid evasion energy shield piece with maximum life, energy shield and evasion modifiers, and some resistance. Remember, a hybrid evasion energy shield chest piece is better than a pure evasion chest piece, but these hybrid ones are more expensive, so starting off it might be easier to get that pure evasion chest piece. For your gloves, you want flat physical damage and cold damage with attack speed, and then slot in some rarity. Your belt is your defensive dump. Look for maximum life, maximum mana, and resistances. For your boots, you want evasion, energy shield hybrid boots with movement speed, energy shield affixes, resistances, and rarity. For any piece of gear I've discussed today that feels unaffordable, drop the rarity and the price will probably be 5 times, 10 times cheaper. Let's go over our passive skill tree, starting off with our Ascendancy nodes. You want to get Lead Me from Grace. This will give you all the spirit you need to be able to use all the buffs in this build. In the endgame, you don't need Protect Me from Harm. Armor doesn't do that much in this game, so that 40% evasion penalty is really unnecessary. Instead, we now get I Am the Blizzard for more cold damage. This also creates Chilled Ground, so our Pulsarcane ring can do more shatters. I also get I Am the Thunder for more lightning damage, and then we also get Sunder My Enemies, so critical hits ignore elemental resistances. This means we don't need to run things like Hypothermia anymore, and this node also helps for those tier 15 maps where you get those suffixes which boost enemy resistances. For our passive nodes, there's a real focus on getting attack speed, attack damage, critical hit nodes. We start off by getting these skill speed and attack damage nodes. We get these nodes here: Killer Instinct, tenfold attacks to boost our damage even further, Deep Trance increases our attack speed, and then we get these critical hit nodes here, which are all great for boosting DPS. Blinding Strike is a big attack damage bonus, and then we also get Sharp Sight and Serrated Edges. Falcon Technique down here is a near 15% attack speed bonus depending on your dexterity, and that gives me nearly 10k DPS, so it's well worth getting. The other nodes in this build focus on getting more evasion and energy shields, such as Mindful Awareness, Inner Faith, and Bestial Skin. I do recommend getting some freeze build-up nodes because that will help with bosses especially, but you could refund some of these nodes for more defensive nodes such as Immaterial or Subterfuge Mask. For duels, the Rage on Hit duel is mandatory as I've discussed before. These can roll with melee damage, elemental damage, global physical damage as well, so look out for those combinations. For your other slots, look for emeralds with attack speed, critical hit chance, and damage boosting nodes. You can also look for time lost emeralds which give attack speed, critical hit bonuses, damage bonuses based on the number of passives or notables nearby, but they are much harder to search for on the trade website because you can't at the moment search for their affixes, so you have to manually scroll through thousands of emeralds. And then finally for my Atlas, I have Constant Crossroads for more Waystone drops, Lucky Pillage for more drops and better drops, Fortunate Path for better quality Waystones, Twin Threats so maps have more rare monsters, Deadly Evolution so rares have more modifiers, which makes them harder to kill, but it does make them drop more and better loot. Unstable Energies, which has a chance to make our Waystones 25% better or sometimes 25% worse, but it's worth the gamble. Remnants of Power, so Precursor Tablets have a small chance to have double effect. And finally, Precursor Influence for more Precursor Tablet drops. So there you have it, the complete endgame guide to the Ice Strike Monk. This should really help you to push your DPS and your survivability so you can conquer the endgame with ease. If you enjoyed what I talked about today, remember to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel for more Path of Exile build guides. I'm Mr. Ronit, and that's it for today. Peace out, guys.